A serving Metropolitan Police officer has been charged with sexual assault on 2 children in Surrey. Surrey Police said Jamie Howlett, 33, formerly of Hawley, has been charged with 6 counts of sexual assault by touching of a child under 13. The force said 3 of the charges related to 1 victim and 3 related to a second victim. He has also been further charged with multiple offences against a 3rd adult victim. These were 5 offences of rape, 1 charge of controlling and coercive behaviour, 1 charge of sexual assault by touching, 1 charge of sexual assault by penetration, and 1 charge of assault causing actual bodily harm. He will appear at Staines Magistrate Court on the 9th of August. A Nottinghamshire writer who penned a play about England manager Gareth Southgate will rewrite the script to reflect 3 lines Euro 2024 journey. James Graham said he would change the ending of Dear England to include the drama following the defeat to Spain on Sunday. The writer, who is originally from Mansfield, was also asked to write the script for a 2-minute montage that was broadcast ahead of the BBC's final coverage. He said that the last 8 years of English football has been remarkable. Dear England, which originated as a National Theatre play of the same name, will be turned into a 4-part television drama for BBC One. Mr. Graham said, and weeks. It feels bad this morning, but it feels different now being in England than it did in the early noughties and 2010s. That's what inspires me. Southgate is not what you would consider to be a normal protagonist, warrior figure. He is softer and quieter than that, but he's done something really loud and really epic. England were beaten 2-1 by Spain in the Euro 2024 final in Berlin on Sunday after an 86th minute winner from Mikel Oyarzabal. Southgate, aged 53, has been in charge since 2016, but his current contract is due to expire in December. Mr. Graham called him the unlikely hero after he was initially only appointed on a caretaker basis following the departure of Sam Allardyce. He added, "Something has happened that's been completely transformative, and for me personally, I didn't need to get to the very end of that story for it to be impactful, beautiful, meaningful, emotional. We're on a journey, it's not a destination." Gareth Southgate has laid some extraordinary tracks that I think are going to get us to that destination terminus at some point very soon in our future. I suspect that we have to stop thinking of it as a wait. We are going to have to eventually learn as England fans to enjoy that journey and get joy from it. If we don't get joy from it, what is the point of putting ourselves through that every time? BBC racing commentator John Hunt has urged people to make the most of every day after a crossbow attack that killed 3 of his family members. Carol Hunt, 61, Hannah Hunt, 28, and Louise Hunt, 25, were fatally injured at their home in Bushey, Hertfordshire on 9th of July. Fellow commentator Matt Chapman said proceeds from a fundraiser set after the attack would support Mr. Hunt's surviving daughter, Amy. Family means more to some than others, and for John, his family unit was something he absolutely adored. Kyle Clifford, 26, from Enfield, North London, was arrested on Thursday evening on suspicion of 3 counts of murder. Hertfordshire Constabulary said on Monday that he remained injured in hospital and had yet to be questioned. More than £28,000 has been collected since the fundraiser was launched, along with hundreds of messages of support. Mr. Chapman said Mr. Hunt had told him his biggest desire was to ensure Amy had no money worries for the rest of her life. There are a lot of people, including myself, who feel helpless and would like to do something. John would like nothing more for Amy after these horrific events than a life that is a little less stressful, because life will never be stress-free again. It's not going to take their grief away, it's not going to take the pain away, or change anything, but it might help them have an easier life. Mr. Chapman, an ITV commentator, said he had been in frequent contact with the very talented Mr. Hunt following last week's events. He told me, "Matty, the message I would tell everyone is you never know when it's going to be the last day you see your family." The message was very clear. Make the most of every day because you just don't know. Mr. Chapman added that during the phone calls to Mr. Hunt, he would often be at home and you could feel that family life in the background. In a statement released on Saturday, Mr. Hunt and Amy said that their devastation cannot be put into words. They thanked people for their kind messages, which have provided great comfort. Detective Superintendent Rob Hall from the Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire and Hertfordshire Major Crime Unit previously said the investigation was moving at pace. A crossbow was found on Thursday as inquiries continued, police said. A vigil held at St. James's Church that day saw more than 50 people attend to pay their respects. The police watchdog has started an investigation after a video was shared of officers using their batons on a man during an arrest. Footage of the incident, which followed a crash in Nottinghamshire on the 27th of May, has been widely viewed online. The Independent Office for Public Conduct, IOPC, said the man, who was in his 40s, was de-arrested and made a complaint about the way he had been treated by officers. It added its investigation was launched following a mandatory referral made by Nottinghamshire Police on the 25th of June. The police force is undertaking their own investigation into the incident, which happened in Daleside Road, Colwick. IOPC Regional Director Derek Campbell said, "We are aware people used mobile phones to film police making an arrest, and we would ask anyone with footage who we have not spoken to already to come forward. In particular, we want to hear from two men, one of whom was on a quad bike, who may have recorded what happened and be able to assist our investigation. We understand the public concern that can be caused by incidents like this, and our independent investigation will consider the legitimacy of the arrest, as well as the justification about proportionality of the force used by officers." Documents belonging to Jay Slater have been discovered on the body found in Tenerife during the search for the 19-year-old, with suggestions the cause of death was an accidental fall, officials say. The Canary Islands High Court of Justice said it was likely it would not be until next week until there was full and official identification of the body and a probable cause of death. In a statement, it added, "It is confirmed that the documentation that was on the body found yesterday in the mountains of Masca belongs to Jay Slater, and everything suggests that this was an accidental fall." The teenager from Oswald Thistle in Lancashire was last seen on the 17th of June after visiting an Airbnb rented by two people he had been with at the RNG Music Festival on the island. Spanish police earlier released video footage of rescuers climbing rock faces and battling through scrub as they had carried out the search. Part of the clip showed two members of the team being winched out of the area by helicopter after the body was found. They said Mr. Slater could have fallen into the steep and inaccessible area where he was discovered. Jack Black has said he's cancelled the rest of the Tenacious D World Tour after his bandmate Carl Glass sparked an outcry with comment about the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. The comedy rock group were on stage in Sydney, Australia on Sunday when Glass was asked to make a wish after being presented with a cake for his 64th birthday. He appeared to reply, "Don't miss Trump next time." In a statement on Instagram, Black said he was blindsided by the comment. "I would never condone hate speech or encourage political violence in any form," the comedian and actor wrote. He said he didn't feel it was appropriate to continue the Tenacious D tour and that the rest of the group's creative plans are on hold. The controversy has already led to Tuesday's gig in Newcastle, New South Wales, being postponed. Disney has confirmed it is investigating an apparent leak of internal messages by a hacking group, which claims it is protecting artists' rights. The group, Null Bulge, said it had gained access to thousands of communications from Disney employees and had downloaded every file possible. It is not clear how commercially sensitive the information is for the media and theme park giant, but it is reported to include messages about upcoming projects the firm is working on. Disney is investigating this matter. Null Bulge's website says the group targets anyone it believes is harming the creative industry by using content generated by artificial intelligence, which it describes as theft. They have made contact with the hackers who claim to be in Russia and say they got into Disney's internal Slack messaging system through an insider. But when asked for a sample of the stolen data to verify its authenticity, the hackers did not respond, meaning they can't be independently assessed if the huge data trove is genuine. Disney was our target due to how it handles artists' contracts, its approach to AI, and its pretty blatant disregard for the consumer, the hackers claimed. They said they released the data because they didn't expect Disney to meet their demands to stop using AI. It is unusual for hackers to claim that they are Russian hacktivists with an ethical agenda. Most cybercriminals, including those in Russia, aim to make money by extorting their victims. The leak was first reported in the gaming press and then picked up by the Wall Street Journal, which said that some of the leaked material related to advertising campaigns and interview candidates, with some dating back as far as 2019. There's been a growing concern amongst performers, artists, and other creatives that the rapid spread of generative AI will undermine their livelihoods and damage the creative environment. Generative AI is trained on vast bodies of existing material, including text, images, music, and video. It is then able to produce new work of a standard that can be hard to distinguish from human-generated material. Some artists and authors have claimed AI firms breached copyright by using their original work to train these AI tools. Null Bulge describes itself as a hacktivist group protecting artists' rights and ensuring a fair compensation for their work. Our hats are not those of malice, but to punish those caught stealing, it says on its website. We will work tirelessly to develop and implement solutions that protect the rights and livelihoods of artists in the digital age. The Walt Disney Company's business range from filmmaking and streaming services, Disney Plus and Hulu, to video games and theme parks dotted across the globe. It owns the hugely successful Marvel and Star Wars franchises. The prospective new owner of Royal Mail has said he will not walk away from the requirement to deliver letters throughout the UK 6 days a week. They exclude this, Czech billionaire Daniel Kretinsky said. Mr. Kretinsky has a £3.6 billion offer, but the government also has a say over whether it goes ahead. Currently, the Universal Service Obligation (USO) requires Royal Mail to deliver letters 6 days a week throughout the country for the same price, but questions have been raised over whether the service could be reduced in future. In an interview, Mr. Kretinsky also said he would be willing to share profits with employees if given the go-ahead to buy the group. However, he appeared to reject the idea of employees having a stake in Royal Mail, which unions have called for in exchange for their support. The Royal Mail board agreed a £3.6 billion takeover offer from Mr. Kretinsky in May for the 500-year-old organisation, which employs more than 150,000 people, including assumed debts. The offer is worth £5 billion. But because Royal Mail is a nationally important company, the government has the power to scrutinise and potentially block the deal. As well as keeping the new government on side, Mr. Kretinsky also faces the task of convincing postal unions that the proposed deal will benefit employees. The USO is a potential sticking point for both the government and unions. Royal Mail is required by law to deliver letters 6 days a week and parcels 5 days a week to every address in the UK for a fixed price. How well this actually has been working in practice is a different matter. 10 years ago, 92% of first-class post arrived on time. By the end of last year, it was down to 74%, according to the regulator Ofcom. Last year, the regulator fined Royal Mail £5.6 million for failing to meet its delivery targets. Royal Mail has been pushing for this obligation to be watered down. It wants to cut second-class letter deliveries to every other weekday, saying that this will save £300 million and lead to fewer than 1,000 voluntary redundancies. Mr. Kretinsky has committed in writing to the USO, but only for 5 years, and after that, in theory, the new owners could just walk away from it. However, Mr. Kretinsky said, "As long as I'm alive, I completely exclude this, and I'm sure that anybody that would be my successor would absolutely understand this. I say this is an absolute clear, unconditional commitment. Royal Mail is going to be the provider of universal service obligation in the UK, I would say forever, as long as the service is going to be needed, and as long as we are going to be around." Mr. Kretinsky added that the written 5-year commitment was the longest commitment that has ever been offered in a situation like this. Another potential stumbling block for the deal, however, is how the company will be structured. Unions would like to see the company renationalised, but Dave Ward, General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union, said that would be difficult in the current political and economic environment. Instead, what the CWU is pushing for is a different model of ownership. That is where the employees part-own the business. To get its support for the takeover, the union wants employees to share ownership of the company, along with other concessions, including board representations for workers. It says profit sharing is not going to be enough to deliver our support and the support of the workforce. If the union doesn't get what it wants, it won't rule out industrial action, Mr. Ward said. Its members went on strike in 2022 and 2023. Although Mr. Kretinsky said he is very open to profit sharing, he is not in favour of shared ownership. "I don't think the ownership stake is the right model," he said. "The logic is share of profit, yes, but an ownership structure creates a lot of complexity. For instance, what happens if the employee leaves? He has shares, he is leaving, he is not working for the company, he still needs remunerating." Mr. Kretinsky said he didn't want to create some anonymous structure, but instead remunerate the people who are working for the company and creating value for the company. The union is also concerned about job losses and changes to the terms and conditions of postal workers' contracts. Mr. Kretinsky has guaranteed no compulsory redundancies or changes in terms and conditions, but only until 2025. "If we are more successful and we have more parcels to be delivered, we need not less people, but we need more people," he said. "So really, job cuts are not part of our plan at all." He said if the management, union and employees work together, we will be successful. Another concern is the potential breakup of the business. The profit for Royal Mail's parent company last year was entirely generated by its German and Canadian logistics and parcels business, GLS. Royal Mail itself made a loss. Mr. Kretinsky has promised not to split off GLS or load the parent company with excessive debt, although borrowings will rise if the deal goes through. But he has a way to go to convince the CWU. "I can't think of any other country in the world that would just hand over its entire postal service to an overseas equity investor. However, Mr. Kretinsky said that the postal unions do understand that we are on the same ship, and that we need this ship to be successful, and that if we are there, we don't have any real problems to deal with, because the sky is blue and it's blue for everybody. The union cannot stop this deal, but the government can block it under the National Security and Investment Act. Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds has said he will scrutinise the assurances and guarantee and called on Mr. to work constructively with the unions. Mr. Kretinsky may say that he and the unions understand they are not on the same page. Daniel Kretinsky started his career as a lawyer in his hometown of Brno before moving to Prague. He then made serious money in Central and Eastern European energy interests. This includes Stream, which transports Russian gas via pipelines that run through Ukraine, the Czech Republic and Slovakia. He then diversified into other investments, including an almost 10% stake in UK supermarket chain Sainsbury's and a 27% share in Premier League club West Ham United. The Czech businessman is worth about £6 billion, according to reports. Stranger Things fans have gone wild after the show's makers posted an update from the set of its 5th season. The Netflix sci-fi drama, first released in July 2016, is one of the streamer's biggest hits and has made stars of its cast. To celebrate the 8th anniversary of its debut, producers uploaded a behind-the-scenes clip announcing that the crew were halfway through filming Season 5. Stranger Things' final episodes don't yet have an official release date, but it's been suggested that they could arrive next year. The 2-minute teaser video opens with a shot of a clapperboard before showing a montage of well-known locations from the show, such as Hawkins High School. Then Caleb McLaughlin, who plays Lucas, narrates over the footage. "Welcome to Season 5 of Stranger Things." We then see a shot of Mike, Lucas, Will and Dustin, the original group of 4 characters who were at the centre of Season 1. After spending much of the series' 4th outing separated, fans have been hoping to see the gang back together. Later on in the video, Finn Wolfhard, who plays Mike, says he's excited to have scenes with the original floor. A clip of Millie Bobby Brown, who plays psychic character 11, is shown cut with footage of her acting in Season 1. "I started when I was 10 years old. The clip then cuts to her driving a car and the star adds, "I'm just turning 20 years old." Later then, Gaten Matarazzo, who plays Dustin, is seen walking onto the set and can be heard saying, "This is home." There has been previously some criticism of Stranger Things because the gap between seasons meant the actors had aged far more than their characters. Given the cliffhanger ending of Season 4, it seems as though the show is planning to pick up where it left off. Fans also got a glimpse of British actor Jamie Campbell-Bower, who plays the evil Vecna. At the end of the Season 4, his character appeared to escape from a climactic battle with 11, but not before opening a rift between the character's world and alternative dimension, the Upside Down. Jamie is briefly seen walking towards a makeup table where he would have spent hours being fitted for his character's prosthetics. There's also a brief shot of actress Linda Hamilton, who's best known for her work on the Terminator movies. Directors the Duffer Brothers liked to package Stranger Things with references to 80s pop culture, and previous series have featured appearances from actors who got their big breaks during the decade. That includes Goonies star Sean Astin and horror actor Robert Englund, the man behind the iconic Freddy Krueger. Within hours of being posted, the teaser clip had more than 1 million views across TikTok, YouTube and X. For the most part, fans were happy to receive an update on the progress of the highly anticipated last ever season. However, a number responded to express unhappiness that actor Noah Schnapp, who plays Will Byers, would appear in Season 5. Noah, who is Jewish, previously received criticism for posting messages in support of Israel following the 7th of October attack by Hamas. He later posted a video which has since disappeared, stating that his views had been misconstrued and that he wanted peace and safety and security for all innocent people affected by the conflict. Russian antivirus giant Kaspersky Labs has said that it is leaving the US after the Biden administration banned sales and distribution of the firm's software. Kaspersky said it has made the sad and difficult decision to leave as business opportunities in the country are no longer viable. It comes after Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo said last month that Moscow's influence over the company posed a significant risk to US infrastructure and services. Kaspersky, which has been operating in the US for 2 decades, has denied the allegations. Starting from July 20th, 2024, Kaspersky will gradually wind down its US operations and eliminate US-based positions, the firm said in a statement. Its US website has already stopped selling its antivirus and cybersecurity tools with a message reading "Purchase is unavailable for US customers." The announcement came after sales and distribution of Kaspersky products were banned in the US. Ms. Raimondo said the US was compelled to take action due to Russia's capacity and intent to collect and weaponize the personal information of Americans. Kaspersky will generally no longer be able to, among other activities, sell its own software within the United States or provide updates to software already in use, the Commerce Department said. The ruling used broad powers created by the Trump administration to ban or restrict transactions between US firms and technology companies from foreign adversary nations like Russia and China. It effectively barred downloads of software updates, resales and licensing of the products from the 29th of September, while new business was to be restricted within 30 days of the announcement. Sellers and resellers who violate the restrictions will face fines from the Commerce Department. According to the Commerce Department, the Moscow-headquartered multinational company has offices in 31 countries across the world, servicing more than 400 million users and 270,000 corporate clients in more than 2,000 countries. At the time, Kaspersky said it intended to pursue all legally available options to fight the ban and denied it engaged in any activity that threatened US security. Perched on a remote mountain top and surrounded by lowlands, Mabu is what is known as a Sky Island and is the largest rainforest in South Africa. It's hard to imagine anyone taking more delight in their work than the 36-year-old Mozambican beetle expert Dr. Gimo Daniel. They're crouched around a small hole in the dirt not far from the camp in the center of the forest. Dr. Daniel's mission, like that of almost everyone on their expedition, is to find things that science has not seen before. Dung beetles are Dr. Daniel's specialty, and he chuckles as he pulls out a big plastic tube of bait. The smell is as you'd expect, pungent and impossible to ignore. Dr. Daniel tells them that he has already discovered what he believes are 15 new species of dung beetles. They can smell it up to 50 meters from here, so they come as fast as they can, he says. It's brunch. 20 years ago, it was a secret to all but the locals. It was discovered for the outside world by Professor Julian Bayliss in 2004, an explorer and ecologist who now lives in North Wales. He was surveying satellite images of northern Mozambique when he came across a previously unknown dark green patch. A first expedition the following year confirmed that although locals had been hunting in the forest, it was in incredibly good condition, and its size at 75 square kilometers made Mabu the largest single block of rainforest in South Africa. I was like, oh my god, this is phenomenal, Professor Bayliss recalls. In early expeditions to Mabu, one of which they joined in 2019, Professor Bayliss was at the forefront of a gold rush of discoveries, quickly finding several new species of chameleon, snake and butterfly. In all, Professor Bayliss says they found at least 25 new species, and that's not even counting the dung beetles, many of which still need to be officially recognised. What makes Mabu so special is its geography. A medium-altitude rainforest, it protrudes above Mozambique's lowlands, makes it effectively a sky island. That means most of the animals and insects that live there have no way of meeting and breeding with other populations, increasing the chances of them evolving in isolation into something unique and new to science. The expedition they joined at Professor Bayliss' invitation was the first time a team of scientists had based themselves on Mozambique's long history of civil war, the longest of which ended in 1992. It was also helped by the fact that it's just hard to get there. After driving 5 hours along dirt roads, all of the camping gear, food and equipment is loaded onto the backs and heads of more than 60 porters. While they and the scientists adjusted their walking boots and dropped hydration salts in their water bottles, the porters, many of them wearing just flip-flops, marched up Mount Mabu's steep slopes. One of the first to find something new is Erica Tavelli, a freshwater fish expert from Mozambique's Natural History Museum. In the stream that runs through camp, she catches a type of small catfish she's not seen before. I hope that we have a new species for this area, she says with a smile as she holds up a see-through bag of dead fish. They will be preserved in formaldehyde for further analysis and comparison with other similar species. Amazing, it'll be the first new species for them. The process of definitively identifying a new species can take years. It involves writing a peer-reviewed paper in a journal in which the differences between the new discovery and its closest relatives are outlined and accepted by other scientists. The next step for Ms. Tavella is to get the DNA of her fish analysed and detailed descriptions and images circulated, and what might be the name. It should be something Mabu-ness, she says. It's a nice way of saying we have one specific species that's from Mabu. Mabu's forest is in good condition, but that's not to say that some things haven't changed. The large mammals that once inhabited it, like lions, rhinos and buffaloes, have all been hunted out, most likely for food during the war. Deforestation has taken its toll, though not as badly as other forests in southern Africa. It's very visible that forests in South Africa that I've been to just 15 to 20 years ago have now disappeared, cut down for many different reasons, said Professor Ara Monogem, an expert in small mammals from the University of Eswatini, who was on the trip. The deforestation has so far been limited, but locals are certainly hunting. Camera traps show hunters carrying animals that they've caught, and they see physical traps made from calf springs set just off the tracks through the forest. But at the same time, species of smaller mammals are also being discovered. They included a horseshoe bat called Rhinolophus mabunis and a dwarf musk shrew, which scientists are still in the process of naming and describing. Not everyone on the expedition is looking for new species. Bird experts Claire Spottiswoode and Callan Cohen have a very specific mission: to find evidence that one of Africa's rarest birds is still alive. The Namu apalis only lives at altitude, and there are fears that a combination of the destruction of forest elsewhere and warming temperatures are pushing the small yellow and black bird towards extinction. Climate change often has these effects that are hard to predict, Callan Cohen explains, pointing out that sometimes warmer temperatures encourage snake activity, which means more nests and chicks come under attack. Trying to find the rare bird involves playing it a recording of a Namu apalis through a Bluetooth speaker and then waiting to see if any respond. There's no sign or sound on the day that they joined the search, but several days later the bird experts returned to camp late at night, bringing with them good news. They managed to record some of the Namu apalis on one of the higher ridges. It's still a little concerning, to be honest, Dr. Cohen says, of the huge effort it had taken. So what happens next? Mr. Mabu, at least the signs appear to be positive. Fejul Kalenga, the Director General of Mozambique's conservation areas, tells them in an interview that Mabu is to be turned into a community protected area. That'll mean no logging or mining is allowed, but that the locals who depend on the forest for their livelihoods will manage and be able to use it. Of the role played by the scientists work in getting the area protected, he says it's much easier to stand up for those areas in which they have unique resources present. Mr. Kalenga said Mabu now forms part of Mozambique's commitment to a global biodiversity pledge to protect 30% of its land by 2030. Having led so many expeditions into Mabu Forest, Professor Bayliss is cautiously optimistic that if the management plan is done well, Mabu will turn into a conservation success story. He is already looking elsewhere in Africa for other sites that need protection. Defence Secretary John Healey hailed the government's defence review as the first of its kind and said it will take a fresh look at the challenges we face. Mr. Healey noted that the increasing instability and uncertainty around the world, including the conflict in the Middle East and war in Ukraine, and said threats are growing. The Strategic Defence Review will consider the current state of the armed forces, the threats the UK faces, and the capabilities needed to address them. Sir Keir Starmer has previously said the review will set out a roadmap to the goal of spending 2.5% of national income on defence, a target he has made a cast-iron commitment to, but is yet to put a timeline on. On Monday, the Prime Minister said the root and branch review of the armed forces would help prepare the UK for a more dangerous and volatile world. The review will invite submissions from the military, veterans, MPs, the defence industry, the public, academics and the UK's allies until the end of September, and aims to deliver its findings in the first half of 2025. I promised the British people I would deliver the change needed to take our country forward, and I promised action, not words. That's why one of my first acts since taking office is to launch our Strategic Defence Review. We will make sure our hollowed-out armed forces are bolstered and respected, that defence spending is responsibly increased, and that our country has the capabilities needed to ensure the UK's resilience for the long term. The review will be overseen by Defence Secretary John Healey and headed by former NATO Secretary General Lord Robertson, along with former US Presidential Advisor Fiona Hill and former Joint Force Commander Sir Richard Barrons. The group will have their work cut out. The global security threats facing the UK and its Western allies are more serious and more complex than at any time since the end of the Cold War in 1990. They also coincide with what many commentators have said is a catastrophic running down of the UK's armed forces to the point where the country is arguably no longer considered to be a Tier 1 military force. In terms of the number of troops in its regular forces, The British Army is now at its smallest size since the time of the Neapolitan Wars 2 centuries ago. Recruitment is failing to match retention, with many soldiers and officers complaining about neglected and substandard accommodation. The Royal Navy, which has spent vast sums on its two centrepiece aircraft carriers, is in need of many more surplus ships to fulfill its tasks around the globe. Its aging fleet of nuclear-armed Vanguard submarines, the cornerstone of the UK's strategic defence and known as continuous at-sea deterrent, CA, is overdue for replacement by 4 Dreadnought-class submarines, and costs are mounting. Commenting on the review, Mr Healy said, "Hollowed-out armed forces, procurement waste and neglected morale cannot continue. The defence and security threats facing the UK, NATO and its allies, they include a war raging on Europe's eastern flank in Ukraine against Russia's full-scale invasion. The UK, along with the EU and NATO, has opted to help defend Ukraine with multi-billion-pound packages of weapons and aid, stopping short of committing combat troops. The policy behind this is not entirely altruistic. European governments, especially those closest to Russia, like Poland and the Baltic states, or he rebuilds his army and invades them next. Some of those countries are already busy beefing up their own defence, spending closer to 3 or even 4% of GDP. The challenge for NATO has been how to provide Ukraine with as much weaponry as it can, without provoking Russia into retaliating against a NATO state and risk triggering a Third World War. The Royal Navy has been in action recently in the Red Sea, where it has been operating alongside the US Navy in fending off attacks on shipping by the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen. But the UK has also made naval commitments further afield in the South China Sea with the AUKUS Pact, comprising of Australia, UK and the US, aimed at containing Chinese expansion in the region. Critics have questioned whether a financially constrained UK can afford to make commitments like this on the other side of the world. Close to home in Europe, there is a growing threat from so-called hybrid warfare attacks, suspected of coming from Russia. These are unnatural attacks on undersea pipelines and telecoms cables on which Western nations depend. As tensions increase with Moscow, there are fears such actions will only increase, and the UK cannot possibly hope to guard all of its coastline all of the time. But while those nervous NATO partners living close to Russia's borders are busy beefing up their defence, spending 3 or even 4% of GDP, the UK has so far declined to put a timetable on when it will raise its own defence spending to just 2.5%. Opposition figures have criticised the government for refusing to say when defence spending will be increased. Before his election defeat, former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak committed to reaching 2.5% by 2030. Shadow Defence Secretary James Cartledge previously said, "In a world that is more volatile and dangerous than at any other time since the Cold War, Keir Starmer's Labour government had a clear choice to match the Conservatives' fully funded pledge to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence by 2030. By failing to do so, they've created huge uncertainty for our armed forces at the worst possible time." A woman has denied assault after a milkshake was thrown over Nigel Farage during the general election campaign. The Reform UK leader was leaving a pub in Clacton-on-Sea on the 4th of June, having launched his candidacy for the Essex constituency, when a milkshake was hurled in his face. Victoria Thomas Bowen, 25, of St Alseth Road in Clacton, has appeared at Westminster Magistrates Court and pleaded not guilty to assault by beating and criminal damage. Mr Farage, who won the seat after the 4th of July vote, was campaigning at the Moon and Starfish pub on the seafront when the incident happened. He seemed to make light of the incident later on in the day when he posed with a tray of 4 milkshakes in the nearby village of Jaywick. Miss Thomas Bowen has been released on unconditional bail and is next due to appear at the same court for trial on the 21st of October. Caroline Liggins, representing the defendant, said, "My client strongly protests her innocence and looks forward to fighting these unjust charges in court." Last month, Just Greedy, 28, admitted using threatening behaviour after throwing a coffee cup and another item at Mr Farage as he campaigned in Barnsley, South Yorkshire on Tuesday, the 11th of June. Greedy of Damsbrook Drive, Clown, Derbyshire, is due to be sentenced on the 28th of August. Milkshaking, the act of dousing public figures with a drink, was recognised as a word by the Collins Dictionary in 2019. The Deputy Prime Minister has dismissed comments by Donald Trump's running mate for US Vice President that UK under Labour might be the first truly Islamist country with nuclear weapons. J.D. Vance, the senator chosen as Mr Trump's vice presidential candidate on Monday night, made the comments while at the National Conservatism Conference in Washington, D.C. last week. The 39-year-old said he was beating up on the UK and had discussed with a friend What is the first truly Islamist country to get a nuclear weapon? Then joked maybe it's Iran, maybe Pakistan kind of counts, and then we sort of decided maybe it's actually the UK, since Labour just took over. The suggestion that Islamists are gaining in power in some European countries with Muslim minorities is common in some right-wing US political circles. Angela Rayner told ITV that Mr Vance had said quite a lot of fruity things in the past, but said does not recognise his characterisation of the UK. She added that she looked forward to meeting him and Mr Trump if they won the US election in November. She added, "I'm very proud of the election success that Labour had recently. We won votes across all different communities, across the whole of the country, and we're interested in governing on behalf of Britain and also working with our international allies." Mr Vance's comments were also criticised by Exchequer Secretary James Murray. Mr Murray said, "I don't know what he was driving at in that comment, to be honest. I mean, in Britain, we're very proud of our diversity. I'm very proud that we have a new government. I'm very proud that our Labour government is committed to national security and economic growth. I'm very clear where we are." I don't really know how that comment fits in. Foreign Secretary David Lammy has spent recent months consciously seeking to forge strong relationships with Donald Trump's allies, among them Mr Vance. Mr Lee met Mr Vance alongside several Trump allies during a goodwill mission to the US in May, describing him as a friend. In a speech at the right-leaning Hudson Institute in Washington in May, Mr Lammy said that Mr Vance was right to say we in Europe have a problem that we need to fix with higher defence expenditure. He also said that Mr Trump has been often misunderstood when it comes to NATO, that he gets the agenda that drives America first, and that he would find a common cause with a Trump administration. But Mr Vance's selection could pose a challenge for the new Labour government if Mr Trump returns to the White House. Former President Mr Trump has opted for one of the most isolationist members of the Republican Party. The former Trump critic, now Trump evangelist, opposing £3 billion on aid for Ukraine for as long as it takes. Mr Vance also criticised Europe's overdependence on the US in foreign policy, potentially straining US-UK relations. Regardless of Mr Vance's recent intervention, Labour believes their diplomacy with Mr Trump's team is beginning to bear fruit. Labour sources point to Sir Keir's conversation with the ex-president on Sunday in the aftermath of the assassination attempt, the first time the pair has spoken. Andrew Bowie, the shadow Veterans Minister, said he absolutely disagreed with the claim that Labour was creating an Islamist country. He told Times Radio, "I disagree with the Labour Party fundamentally on many issues, but I do not agree with that view, quite frankly. I think it's actually quite offensive, frankly, to my colleagues in the Labour Party." TV star Zara McDermott has said she was involved in incidents in the Strictly Come Dancing training room that she now finds incredibly distressing to watch back, following the news that her dance partner Graziano Di Prima has left the show. On Saturday, the BBC confirmed that Di Prima was no longer a part of the lineup of professional dancers for the upcoming series. He said he deeply regrets the events leading up to his departure and acknowledged that his intense passion and determination to win might have affected my training regime. Now, former Love Island star and documentary maker McDermott has posted her own statement saying that she had wrestled with the fear of opening up about her experiences. "I was scared about public backlash, I was scared about my future, I was scared of victim shaming." But she said that she had recently gained the strength to face these fears and speak about her experiences to BBC managers. "I felt it was right that I posted something regarding the recent media reports," she posted on her Instagram stories on Tuesday. She said that she fully understood the level of commitment and hard work that Strictly was going to be, and I dedicated everything to it. "I am a resilient person and I was fully prepared to put in whatever it took. And so much of my Strictly experience was everything I could have dreamt of. The entire production team and everyone behind the scenes, as well as my fellow contestants, was so amazing to work with. However, my experience inside the training room was very different. Reports have been made about my treatment on the show, and there were witnesses to some events, as well as videos of particular incidents which are incredibly distressing to watch." McDermott appeared with Di Prima on last year's series of the BBC One show. She added, "After a lot of conversations with those I love, I've gained the strength to face these fears, and when I was asked to speak to the BBC, I spoke candidly about my time on the show. The culture within our society makes it difficult for people to speak up, especially in a world where social media opinions and voices are so loud. This is something I've seen through working with countless women on my documentaries. I'd like to thank the BBC and BBC Studios for their swift action and incredibly high level of support, as well as everyone who has reached out to me. It really, truly means a lot." In his statement on Saturday, De Prima said, "I deeply regret the events that led to my departure from Strictly. My intense passion and determination to win might have affected my training regime. Respecting the BBC HR process, I understand it's best for the show that I step away. While there are aspects of the story involving external influences that I can't discuss at this time, I remain committed to being strong for my family and friends." He'd previously rejected allegations his behaviour was abusive or threatening, and said he is cooperating fully with the BBC investigation. In his statement at the weekend, he added, "I wish the Strictly family and the BBC nothing but success in the future. I also want to thank everyone who has supported my career, both professionally and personally. When the time is right, I will share my story." On Tuesday, a BBC source said no complaints were made against De Prima during last year's series of Strictly. They said a producer who attended a rehearsal did ask De Prima to be more considerate with his training, and that the matter was resolved at the time to everyone's satisfaction. The BBC is understood to be considering placing members of the production team in rehearsal rooms to act as chaperones in the future. On Saturday, a BBC spokesperson said, "We can confirm that Graziano De Prima is no longer a part of the Strictly professional dancers for the upcoming series of Strictly Come Dancing. While we would never comment on individual cases, it is well known that the BBC has established robust duty of care procedures, and if issues are raised, we will always take them seriously and act swiftly as appropriate." De Prima's departure comes after another professional dancer, Giovanni Fenice, left the show following reports about his teaching methods on the show. Fenice has rejected any suggestion of abusive or threatening behaviour. Drag queen Trixie Mattel will be taking a break from work after struggling for more than a year. Trixie became a world-renowned star after first appearing on RuPaul's Drag Race in 2015. Since then, the Queen returned to the All-Stars version and as host of the spin-off show The Pit Stop, as well as running a YouTube channel and makeup business. Trixie told fans in a video that all the work was not sustainable and there would be a hiatus for at least 3 months. "I need a complete reboot," says Trixie, who uses she/her pronouns in drag and he/him when not performing. It was a rare video where Trixie, real name Brian Furcus, was out of drag. "I feel uncomfortable about telling you so much," Brian says, before opening up about a tough year. "Things happened this year that I'm not ready to talk about. It just really beat it out of me and taught me new lows of the human experience. When you feel like you cannot stop crying and you're so upset, and then you have to put on a wig and make people laugh. It is chilling." Brian says he'd been working himself to death as Trixie and had become ill from stress. "I got to a point where he struggled to enjoy drag, which I feel weird complaining about because all my wildest dreams came true." Brian grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and has previously shared his experience of growing up in poverty. "Growing up poor is traumatizing," he says in the latest video, saying it's affected his work ethic. "You can't take a day off because there's a paycheck waiting. All I was doing was this. It was all work and money making, and then my social life, my family life, my personal life, twigs, frail twigs." As well as Drag Race, Trixie is well known for working with drag queen Katya Zamolodchikova. The pair often perform together and also have a Netflix series and online show, Oh No. Since 2022, Trixie's also had her own show on Discovery Plus, Trixie Mattel, which follows the drag queen as she renovates a motel in California. Brian told fans, "I love doing all my little jobs as Trixie, but has realised it's a good thing to have boundaries. Being a hard worker is fierce, being a hard worker at the expense of your real life and health is not. When you have the fortune that I've had, you shouldn't be stupid and abuse it like I have." Brian says he'll be visiting friends and family and will also be taking a break from social media. "This break is so overdue. I don't know what I'm going to come back as, maybe not even as a drag queen, who knows. I'm very excited to feel really into drag again and really into performing." Intimidation and abuse during the general election put people off campaigning, the head of the Electoral Commission has said. Vijay Rangarajan said that some of the activities seen during the campaign, including slashing tyres and targeting candidates' families, were totally unacceptable. He said the Electoral Commission was conducting a survey of candidates and electoral administrators and would report back in the autumn. Following the 4th of July election, the levels of intimidation faced by candidates has come under the spotlight. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has said she'll be chairing a meeting of the government's Defending Democracy Task Force following the alarming rise in abuse. House of Commons Speaker Sir Lindsay Hoyle said he had never seen anything as bad as the current level of intimidation against MPs, and that their safety kept him awake at night. Electoral Commission boss Mr. Rangarajan said that the election saw a lot of attacks, which did put people off campaigning, did put people off hustings. He also said there was a tremendous amount of online abuse, some of those really quite disturbing, manipulated, misogynistic videos. It's a serious problem, not least because it reduces the democratic debate and it impacts voters themselves. If some candidates are put off standing, particularly we think women, ethnic minorities are putting off standing, then voters will have less choice. He said there needed to be discussions about what counts as valid criticism of politicians and what should be deemed unacceptable behaviour. Some of the incidents seen during the campaign, including slashing tyres, throwing milkshakes and targeting candidates' families, were clearly unacceptable. Appearing on the same programme, Brendan Cox, the widower of murdered MP Joe Cox, said there was a real risk that high levels of intimidation could slowly undermine democracy. Democracy doesn't die in a flash. It's not always a coup d'etat. It can die by 1,000 cuts. He said the election had seen a real increase in the levels of intimidation. Having spoken to lots of MPs about it, there was a sense that something had changed, that they felt hunted, that they felt unable to go about campaigning. Let's be clear, this isn't just about one community, it's not about people that are pro-Gaza. Whether it was around the Scottish referendum or Brexit referendum, I think there is something more causistic in our democratic culture, which means that intimidation of MPs is being seen as more legitimate by a wider range of causes. Last week, the government's advisor on political violence, Lord Wolney, suggested there could have been a concerted campaign by extremists to create a hostile atmosphere for MPs within their constituencies to compel them to cave into political demands. Lord Wolney, who is a Labour MP, before being appointed to the House of Lords by then Prime Minister Boris Johnson, urged the government to investigate whether groups in different areas were working together and to document the dark underbelly of abuse. Speaking to The Guardian, he said that there was a pattern of abuse created by aggressive pro-Palestinian activists. Responding to his interview with the newspaper, Labour MP Diane Abbott said this is just a crude effort to demonise all those who support Palestinian rights. The term milkshaking is the act of dousing a public figure with the drink. It was officially recognised as a word by the Collins Dictionary in 2019 and is often casted on MPs. All 11 water and wastewater companies in England and Wales are now under scrutiny over sewage spills after the regulator said it was expanding its investigation. On Tuesday, Ofwat opened enforcement cases into 4 more firms: Dear Cymru, Welsh Water, Hafren Dyfed, Severn Trent and United Utilities, as part of its probe into how companies manage their sewage treatment works and networks. It began its investigation in 2021, and if found in breach, the companies face being fined. Ofwat Chief Executive David Black said the latest move showed how concerned we are about the sector's environmental performance. It comes a week after water firms hit back at Ofwat's proposal of a £19 a year rise in bills to tackle problems including sewage leaks, with the companies saying the increase would not be enough. Water suppliers have faced increased scrutiny over their environmental and financial performance, as well as executive bonuses and pay. In May, it was found that millions of litres of raw sewage were illegally pumped into one of England's most famous lakes, Windermere, in the Lake District, after a fault, and that United Utilities failed to stop what was found to be illegal pollution. Every major English water company has reported data suggesting that they have discharged raw sewage when the weather is dry, a practice which is potentially illegal. Water companies can release untreated sewage into rivers and seas when it rains to prevent it flooding homes, but such spills are illegal when it is dry. Announcing the 4 firms facing new enforcement action, Ofwat said its investigation had highlighted its concerns that these companies may not be fulfilling their obligations to protect the environment and minimise pollution. The regulator already has enforcement cases against Anglian Water, Northumbrian Water, South West Water, Thames Water, Wessex Water and Yorkshire Water. Southern Water also remains subject to enforcement monitoring following a previous case in 2019, Ofwat said. It was fined £90 million in 2021 after pleading guilty to 6,971 unpermitted sewage discharges. When we find that companies have breached their obligations, we will continue to act. Over recent years, we have imposed penalties and payments of over £300 million on water and wastewater companies. United Utilities said in a statement, "We understand and share people's concerns about the health of the environment and the operation of wastewater systems." The spokesperson for Hafren Dyfed said the firm would ensure that we will not be the reason for any unhealthy rivers in Wales by 2030 and be rapidly reducing polluting spills. Severn Trent said it recently announced a programme worth £1 billion to reduce its impact on rivers to almost zero by 2030, and Dear Cymru said it will not shy away from the challenges facing us. Separately, the Environment Agency said on Sunday that pollution management had hit a new low and called for courts to impose much higher fines for breaches by water companies. Southern Water and South West Water were given just a 1-star rating, the highest being 5, while 4 companies were rated only 2 stars, meaning they require significant improvement, it said in its annual review of the sector. The agency's chair called water companies' performance appalling and said prison sentences should be given for chief executives of water companies who were responsible for the most serious incidents. Scotland is becoming the first part of the UK to incorporate a UN Charter on Children's Rights into law. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child Incorporation Scotland Bill comes into force on Tuesday. The Act will require all Scotland's public authorities, including the government, to seek to protect children and young people's rights, to consider them when making policy decisions, and make it unlawful for them to contravene UN CRC requirements. It will also allow children and young people to use the courts to enforce their rights. Children's Minister Natalie Donn described it as a landmark moment. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, UNCRC, sets out children's rights relating to health and education, leisure and play, fair and equal treatment, protection from exploitation, and the right to be heard. A Holyrood bill incorporating it into law was originally passed in 2021, but the UK Supreme Court ruled some provisions were outside the Scottish Parliament's competence and would have impacted on Westminster legislation. An amended version of the bill went through a reconsideration stage at Holyrood in February. The government said it was changed to reflect our new understanding of the Scottish Parliament's devolved competence. Nicola Killeen, Children and Young People's Commissioner at Scotland, said the Act coming into legal force was a historic moment. All children will have more protection. That's important for all children in Scotland, but it's especially vital for those whose rights are most likely to be ignored or violated, those whose rights are most at risk. That includes disabled children, those living in poverty, young carers, care-experienced children, and black minority ethnic children. The Act will allow the Commissioner's Office to intervene in legal matters and to bring cases forward when children and young people's rights are not being respected. Ms Killeen said Scotland had been taking huge steps forward on children's rights, but warned further education was needed. We can't afford to let complacency creep in. There is much more to do. Joanne Barrett, NSPCC Associate Head of Policy for the Nations, said it was a momentous day for babies, children and young people in Scotland. Among its provisions, the Convention sets out children's right to be safe and their right to access support services to help them recover from abuse or neglect. Enshrining these rights in law should lead to significant changes for Scotland's children, be it better including recognition of infants' rights and lived experiences in the children's hearing system, more protection for children from abuse online, or suggest a better provision of therapeutic services for children across the country who have suffered abuse. The judge who has been overseeing the long-running racketeering trial against Young Thug has been removed. The Atlanta rapper's charges were put on hold earlier this month after lawyers for him and co-defendant Diamante Kendrick asked for the judge to be recused over misconduct allegations. Their lawyers accused Fulton County Superior Court Judge Burrell Glanville of holding an improper meeting on the 10th of June when he met privately with prosecutors and a key witness. Glanville maintained that the meeting was proper and argued that no one gained a tactical advantage as a result. But while Judge Rachel Krause did not fault him for holding the meeting, she ordered the clerk of court to assign the case to a different judge. It will now be overseen by Judge Shukura Ingham, according to Rolling Stone. Krause said she had no doubt that Judge Glanville can and would continue presiding fairly over this matter, but the motion was granted out of the necessity of preserving the public's confidence in the judicial service. Krause acknowledged that the meeting could have and perhaps should have taken place in open court. Brian Steele, a lawyer for Young Thug, said in an email statement to AP that his client is innocent and sought to clear his name through a fair trial. The news has caused more delays in the trial for the rapper, whose real name is Jeffrey Lamar Williams. His case has only inched forward since his arrest in May 2022. Jury selection for the trial, which has included testimony from dozens of witnesses, took nearly 10 months. Prosecutors have accused the Atlanta rapper of co-founding a violent street gang in his hometown, hitting him with racketeering charges. Georgia prosecutions used the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations RICO Act, famously used in mafia prosecutions, to charge the rapper and 27 associates who were allegedly involved in the criminal enterprise. Mr. Williams, 32, is also charged with gang, drug and gun crimes and is standing trial with 5 of the others indicted with him. Mr. Kendrick's lawyer told Rolling Stone that they are considering requesting a mistrial following the recusal. England's Euro 2024 final defeat by Spain on Sunday was watched across the BBC by a peak of 19.3 million people, with an average audience of 17.9 million. The match, which was also shown on ITV, brought in a peak TV audience of 17.8 million on BBC One, with a TV audience share of 63%. Mikel Oyarzabal scored a late winner in Berlin to secure a 2-1 win for the Spanish, who became men's European champions for a record fourth time. Meanwhile, it was the second successive European Championship final loss for Gareth Southgate's side. England's game was also streamed 7.6 million times on BBC iPlayer and the BBC Sport website. A peak audience of 24.2 million watched the game across BBC and ITV, with the figures well down on the Euro 2020 final when England lost on penalties to Italy, which had a peak of more than 30 million. Early on Sunday, the Wimbledon men's singles final between Spain's Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic of Serbia peaked at 7.5 million on BBC One. The match, won in straight sets by Alcaraz, was also streamed live 3.3 million times on BBC iPlayer and BBC Sport. Saturday's women's final, where Rover Krejcikova beat Jasmine Paolini, had a TV peak of 4.1 million and was streamed 1.9 million times, an increase from last year's women's final. These huge figures demonstrate that the BBC is the place audiences turn to when it comes to the big moments, said Alex K. Jalski, director of BBC Sport. We offer something unique across multiple BBC Sport platforms, and it's a privilege to bring these incredible sporting moments to fans, even if the results doesn't always go the way you want. All roads now lead to Paris for the second half of the BBC's Summer of Sport. The Olympics start on the 26th of July, with the Paralympics following up from 28th of August. A review has found no concerns that universities are watering down entry requirements for international students applying to foundation courses. It follows accusations that universities have been lowering standards to recruit overseas students who pay higher fees. The review said entry requirements were broadly the same for international students and UK students on equivalent courses. However, it found that those from overseas had more opportunities to resit exams than A-level students. Universities UK, which represents 142 institutions, commissioned the Quality Assurance Agency, QAA, to carry out the review in February. QAA assessed programs at 34 universities that volunteered to take part. It said it had no concerns that providers were not following their published entry requirements, and that those for international programs were similar to equivalent courses for UK students. QAA said that in the vast majority of cases, students on both types of courses were achieving at an appropriate level. However, it said international students had a greater choice of courses, and on foundation programs had more opportunities to succeed through resit than A-level or Scottish Higher students. Its recommendations for universities include regularly assessing how many international students progress on to further study compared with domestic students, standardising assessment practices and rules on international foundation programs. Vivienne Stern, Chief Executive of Universities UK, said the number of students on these programs represents a small proportion of the 2 million undergraduates studying in our universities, but that the review was important to give students confidence that university admissions processes are fair. She said that swift action was needed in some areas and Universities UK would update its code of practice for fair admissions. The Russell Group said its universities were committed to fair admissions and delivering high-quality courses. Media coverage at the start of the year included a Sunday Times report which claimed international students were using secret routes to buy their way into Russell Group universities. In response, the group of 24 prestigious universities said the reporting referred to foundation year programs for international students which had been incorrectly conflated with degree programs, adding that foundation year programs were also available for UK students. Universities can get more money from international students because their tuition fees are not capped like those of domestic students. An increase in the number of international students over recent years has been driven by applications for postgraduate degrees like master's degrees, according to migration research from the University of Oxford, rather than the undergraduate courses studied by many 18-year-olds in the UK. Scientists have for the first time discovered a cave on the moon. At least 100 metres deep, it could be an ideal place for humans to build a permanent base, they say. It is just one in probably hundreds of caves hidden in an underground, undiscovered world, according to the researchers. Countries are racing to establish a permanent human presence on the moon, but they will need to protect astronauts from radiation, extreme temperatures, and space weather. Hunt Sharman, the first British astronaut to travel to space, said that the newly discovered cave looked like a good place for a base, and suggested humans could potentially be living in lunar pits in 20 to 30 years. But she said this cave is so deep that astronauts might need to sail in and use jetpacks or a lift to get out. Lorenzo Brunzone and Leonardo Carra at the University of Trento in Italy found the cave by using a radar to penetrate the opening of a pit on a rocky plain called the Mare Tranquillitatis. It is possible to the naked eye from Earth and is also where Apollo 11 landed in 1969. The cave has a skylight on the moon's surface, leading down to vertical and overhanging walls, and a sloping floor that might extend further underground. It was made millions or billions of years ago when lava flowed on the moon, creating a tunnel through the rock. The closest equivalent on Earth would be the volcanic caves in Lanzarote, Spain. Professor Carra explains, adding that the researchers visited those caves as part of their work. It's really exciting when you make these discoveries and you look at these images. You realise you're the first person in the history of humanity to see it. Once Professor Brunzone and Professor Carra understood how big the cave was, they realised it could be a good spot for a lunar base. After all, life on Earth began in caves, so it makes sense that humans could live inside them on the moon. The cave has yet to be fully explored, and researchers hope that ground-penetrating radar, cameras, or even robots could be used to map it. Scientists first realised they were probably caves on the moon around 50 years ago. Then, in 2010, a camera on a mission called the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter took pictures of pits that scientists thought could be cave entrances. But researchers did not know how deep the caves might be, or if they could have collapsed. Professor Owen and Professor Carra's work has now answered that question, although there is much more to be done to understand the full scale of the cave. We have very good images of the surface up to 25 centimeters of resolution. We can see the Apollo landing sites, but we know nothing about what lies below the surface. There are huge opportunities for discovery. Francesco Soro, coordinator of the tropical team Planetary Caves of the European Space Agency, said the research may also help us explore caves on Mars in the future. That could open the door to finding evidence of life on Mars, because if it did exist, it would almost certainly have been inside caves protected from the elements on the planet's surface. That may help answer fundamental questions about the history of the moon and even our solar system. The rocks inside the cave will not be as damaged or eroded by space weather, so they can provide an extensive geological record going back billions of years. The research is published in the scientific journal Nature Astronomy. A bill aiming to put into law the Welsh Government's target of 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050 has been published. Labour says its plans would help all school children have a fair opportunity to become confident Welsh speakers. Ministers said the Welsh Language and Education Bill aimed to close the gap caused by children's ability to speak Welsh, varying depending on where they go to school. The law would make immersion of Welsh language education at university available across Wales. Welsh language skills and education would also be increased in schools taught through the medium of English. Cabinet Secretary for the Economy, Energy and Welsh Language, Jeremy Miles, said the bill's publication was a step towards the government's ambition of creating 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050. As a government, we're committed to building a Wales where the Welsh language thrives in every community. In 2021, an estimated 538,000 people in Wales aged 3 and over, 17.8% of the population, said that they can speak it, the Office for National Statistics found. The Welsh Government said it would increase the number of staff able to work in the medium of Welsh and improve the language skills of those already working. Schools would be put into different categories depending on whether they teach solely in Welsh, are bilingual, or hold lessons mainly in English. Each school will have language targets depending on the category it is put in, including minimum acceptable levels. Cabinet Secretary for Educational Lynn Neagle called the bill a long-term project and will continue to support our schools to introduce more Welsh into their activities. Hein Grufford, chair of Welsh language lobbying group Diffodil Iaith, A Future for the Language, said the intention of the bill is very positive. However, he believed the most effective way of learning a language was through total immersion. You don't get natural Welsh speakers from English-speaking schools, except with some brilliant exceptions. You only get Welsh speakers from Welsh medium schools where pupils start in playgroups. If you learn a language after that, you've lost the best opportunity. Gwilyn Morgan, who won the Erd Welsh Learners Medal in 2023, believes the goal of 1 million Welsh speakers is achievable if people can describe themselves as Welsh speakers with a very basic grasp of the language. I think it's achievable if we can clarify what a Welsh speaker is. A lot of people think that being a speaker means you have to be fluent. You don't. I'm a speaker and I'm not fluent. My little brother and sister can say words in Welsh. They're a speaker. They're nowhere near fluent. but we are all speakers of the language. If we say Daelsh, if we say Shwema, which is hi there, we need people to feel they can accept that. Lucy McGee, who studied Welsh A-level as a second language at the Bishop of Llandaff High School in Cardiff, said she intends to keep developing her skills after leaving school. It's made me feel so proud to be Welsh and proud of the culture of Wales, especially because neither of my parents are Welsh. It's made me feel empowered because I chose to learn the language myself and develop those skills. However, she said speaking Welsh in public has been a challenge because of the confidence it requires. Writing I found easier, but speaking to other people outside of school, not just teachers, is definitely a challenge, but it's definitely been helpful in developing the skills to speak Welsh. Lexi Ricketts took AS Welsh and had an interest in the subject because she wanted to identify with our ancestors from parts of North Wales. She said it was important to immerse yourself in the language and the culture to develop as a Welsh speaker. For me, it was quite accessible in school. There was a huge range of opportunities to dive into culture. We went to the Eisteddfod, TAFL and theatre productions. Joe Morgan, who has just finished a second language Welsh A-level and hopes to take some courses in Welsh when he attends Swansea University, said he used the language as often as possible. There's options to study some of the modules through Welsh, which I hope to do because having Welsh behind you, especially in Wales and Cardiff, continue my studies in Welsh. Joe said he considers himself to be a confident Welsh speaker, at least some of the time. I can be when I get into it. It takes a while to feel comfortable with yourself and where your abilities lie. Once you're more confident with your own abilities, you can become a more confident Welsh speaker. He doubts himself when he gets words wrong, but at the end of the day, what people really care about is that you're trying. Shares in Donald Trump's social media company have surged after he survived an assassination attempt on Saturday. Shares in Trump Media, which runs the Truth Social platform, closed up about 31%. The price has risen as much as 70% in pre-market trading over the weekend before falling back again. Analysts said the gains reflected bets that the shooting had improved Mr. Trump's chances of winning the US presidential election in November. A bullet caught the former president's ear during one of his election rallies, shortly before the gunman was shot dead by a Secret Service sniper. "I'm supposed to be dead. I'm not supposed to be here," Mr. Trump said in one of his first interviews since the attack. Billionaire Elon Musk is among those who have formally endorsed Mr. Trump since the shooting. As the election intensifies, investors are betting that more individuals will tune in to the social media platform to express their views as well as be among the first to view the postings from President Trump and his team, said Susan Schmidt, head of public equity at State of Wisconsin Investment Board. However, Wall Street analyst Carrie Leahy said this was a trade about the election more than the business, noting that Truth Social has been struggling to grow. If Trump's chances of being elected go up, is his firm more valuable? Some traders think so. I am confident that if Biden dropped out, Truth Social shares would go down. Mr. Trump founded the Trump Media and Technology Group in 2021 after he lost the 2020 presidential election and was temporarily booted off major social platforms, including Twitter and Facebook, which accused him of inciting violence after the Capitol Hill riots. Truth Social largely follows the same format as X, formerly Twitter, and has about 2 million active users, although claims vary according to different sources. Mr. Trump is the majority shareholder. At the current share price, roughly $40 a share, his holdings are roughly $5 billion, far more than analysts say is justified by the company's sales and operations. The firm's share price has been notoriously volatile, often tied to events in Mr. Trump's life and his election odds. Shares of its predecessor company started rallying in January after Mr. Trump defeated Republican challengers in the primaries. The price soared further after Trump Media formally debuted on the Nasdaq stock exchange in March, but shares slumped at the start of his criminal trial in April, in which he was later convicted of fraud charges linked to hush money that was paid to adult film actress Stormy Daniels. The current share price remains below levels seen in March. There is no current fundamental business performance of the company that supports this current price, but buyers are likely politically supporters purchasing the shares to support the president's wealth ahead of the election, said Thomas J. Hayes, chairman of Great Hill Capital. On Saturday, images of Mr. Trump holding up his fist defiantly to show he had survived the assassination attempt elicited roars from his supporting crowd. Mr. Trump later told US media he felt that he had been saved by luck or by God. The most incredible thing was fear could have easily killed him. One audience member was killed in the attack, while 2 other people were seriously injured. The gunman has been named unclear. The battle for savers has intensified with the choice of products at its highest level for 12 years, according to analysis. UK savers have a choice of 2014 saving deals, the highest number since 2012, the Financial Information Service Moneyfacts says. However, people may have to shop around for the best deals, with loyalty often bringing the lowest returns. In addition, interest rates may drop if the Bank of England decides to cut the benchmark rate in August. Moneyfacts said the choice of accounts was greater than anything seen since May 2012. The number of providers has also risen. Of the 2014 savings deals now available, 571 are cash ISAs, which are tax-free savings accounts. The gap in potential returns for those willing to lock money away for a certain period has widened. The average easy access savings account pays 3.11%, Moneyfacts said, compared with 4.29% on so-called notice accounts. The Bank of England's next decision on the bank rate, which influences the savings and mortgage rates that banks and building societies set, will be on the 1st of August. Analysts believe the choice of whether to cut the benchmark rate stands on a knife edge, although a cut at some point this year is widely expected. With that bank rate currently at 5.25%, the returns being offered by savings providers have been higher than anything seen for a decade or so. Banks and building societies were heavily criticised for the speed at which those rates went up and what was on offer for more loyal customers. Last year, MPs on the Treasury Committee said big banks were doing as little as they can get away with when setting those rates. Moneyfacts said customers would be shortchanged if they did not review and switch accounts away from products that were closed to new savers. Savers must shake any apathy they have to move their pots, otherwise they will be left disappointed when their loyalty is not rewarded, said Rachel Springle from Moneyfacts. A recent study by academics at Bristol University suggested that saving money regularly could help people sleep better. What are my saving options? As a saver, you can shop around for the best account for you. Loyalty often doesn't pay because old savings accounts have among the worst interest rates. Saving products are offered by a range of providers, not just the big banks. The best deal is not the same for everyone. It depends on your circumstances. Higher interest rates are offered if you lock your money away for longer, but that will not suit everyone's lifestyle. Charities say it is important to try to keep some savings, however tight your budget, to help cover any unexpected costs. Prince William has paid tribute to Gareth Southgate after he resigned as England manager. The Prince of Wales said he was thanking Southgate not as president of the FA, but as an England fan. In a statement on X, Prince William said Southgate had shown humility, compassion and true leadership under the most intense pressure and scrutiny during his time leading the England's men's football team. He described Southgate as an all-round class act. You should be incredibly proud of what you've achieved. Southgate announced his resignation after England lost against Spain in the Euro 2024 final on Sunday. The Prince of Wales attended the Euro 2024 final in Berlin on Sunday, where he was joined by Prime Minister Keir Starmer. On Sunday night, the Prince wrote on X, "This time it just wasn't meant to be. We're all still so proud of you." In a letter in the wake of Sunday night's defeat, the King told Southgate and his team to hold your heads high. Three Lions lost 2-1 to Spain in Berlin. It was their second consecutive Euros final defeat, after the team was beaten by Italy on penalties at Wembley 3 years ago. Southgate, 53, has spent 8 years as England manager. His contract was set to expire later this year. Southgate said, "As a proud Englishman, it has been the honour of my life to play for England and to manage England." The process to appoint Southgate's successor has begun, according to Football Association Chief Executive Mark. Many children with disabilities or additional learning needs are being denied the right to an education, a report has found. The Senate's Children, Young People and Education Committee found the education system in Wales is not doing enough to support their needs. One parent said she had faced an endless battle to get support for her 7-year-old twins who have autism, including for areas like childcare support. The Welsh Government said it was committed to breaking down barriers so that all learners can reach their full potential. Beats and Gower Gallagher's 7-year-old twins, Brielle and Bowen, are both autistic and non-verbal and require one-to care for their needs. Miss Gower Gallagher from Trebarnos in the Swansea Valley said ensuring that the girls had access to an education when they were younger was exhausting. "Everything is a battle as parents of disabled children, and everything with education is exhausting. We're not on the same level playing field as other people. Our girls need one-to-one care, and we really had to fight for that. We had to prove our children were disabled, which is ridiculous." Betsan says that summer holidays approaching it is difficult to access childcare while she and her husband work. She said, "I know of places in England where they've got clubs where they can send their high needs disabled children to, but there's nothing in this area." Our childcare at the moment is £1,000 a week for the summer. We both work, but that is an astronomical amount of money. Other people can send their children to a summer club, which might be around £100 a week, which I think is a fair amount. Or even if it was £50 per day, but £1,000 a week is ridiculous. I feel discriminated against. Education and childcare are basic human rights, but disabled children's needs are being constantly ignored and overlooked. The report found that access to education for children with additional needs is patchy across Wales, and it often depends on families working hard and on individual staff. It is calling on the Welsh Government to respond to its 31 recommendations from the year-long inquiry. The recommendations include more training for childcare providers and decisions on financial support to be based on the child's individual needs. The committee is also calling for change in areas including funding for schools, training for all school staff, design of new school buildings, and changes to transport to and from schools. Member of the Senate, Buffy Williams, chair of the committee, said parents were desperate for support. Through this inquiry, we heard from parents who were desperate for someone to listen to them. Many of the stories will stay with and put forward the strongest possible case to the Welsh Government for what needs to change. That's what we set out in this report. It's a structure that is letting them down, not individual teachers or childcare staff who do their best despite it. We can't fail our young people anymore. You only get one chance at an education, and it should be the best chance. A Welsh Government spokesperson said disabled children and young people have a fundamental right to access education, and we are committed to breaking down barriers so that all learners can reach their full potential. We will continue to work across government and with the Disability Rights Task Force to listen to families, disabled children and young people to ensure their voices are heard as we consider this work alongside the Senate Committee's report and recommendations. The Olympic esports games will put gaming at the same level as the Winter and Summer Olympics, according to the boss of one of the world's biggest teams. This week, the International Olympics Committee announced a 12-year partnership with Saudi Arabia to stage the standalone event. The kingdom recently hosted the Esports World Cup, with some fans, players and commentators boycotting the event in protest over its human rights record. Alban Deschalot, CEO of G2 Esports, says the esports version of the Olympics will aim for equal participation of male and female gamers. Alban says he was approached to advise the International Olympic Committee, IOC, as part of its plans to attract younger audiences. He believes it's a huge opportunity for competitive gaming to reach new people. For 20 years, esports and gaming has been growing. It's clear it's not just a trend. We have years of seeing millions of people watching the biggest finals. There's less of a fear and more of a kind of excitement for the potential. Alban says the turning point came at the 2022 Commonwealth Games and Asian Games, which held esports events alongside more traditional sports. People from the Olympic Committee attended and were like, okay, now we get it. Despite declaring the experiment a success, the Commonwealth Games Federation announced esports would not feature at the 2026 Games in Australia. At the time, it didn't reveal plans to hold a separate event. Alban thinks it's the right decision as it stops existing games from getting even bigger. It would be difficult for any city to host. I think it gives more space for a celebration of gaming and esports instead of being one of the additional sports. It's not clear which games will be included in the competition yet, but Rocket League, League of Legends, EAFC and Street Fighter featured in the Asia and Commonwealth Games. There's a question over whether first-person shooters such as Call of Duty and Counter-Strike 2, which both have massive tournament scenes, will be included. Alban says he also has doubts over whether they'll make the cut at first. If you ask me is it going to happen next year, probably not. I think it's totally possible in the future, finding a balance with the values that the Olympic Committee wants to project. One big difference will be players competing under their national flags, a prospect Alban is particularly excited about. Everybody wants to see what a Danish team would do against a Korean team, he says. I'd love to see it too. It also raises the possibility of superstar players from rival teams joining up to compete for their national sides. At the 2022 Asia Games, League of Legends icon Lee Sang-hyuk, aka Faker, was a member of the South Korean squad, with Gen G member Jung Ji-hoon, aka Chovy. Organisers of the Sports World Cup have defended the decision to hold the event in Saudi Arabia. The Arab country where homosexuality is illegal has come in for criticism over its stance on LGBT relationships and lack of rights for women. Similar concerns over sports washing accusations of hosting big events to distract from these issues have followed the Olympic announcement. Alban says his own experiences in Saudi Arabia, where a number of high-profile esports events have been staged, have been positive. Like the World Cup bosses, he also says he has assurances from Saudi officials that the competition will be open to anyone regardless of gender or sexuality. Not everyone is convinced, and the World Cup has also faced criticism for a lack of female representation, with just 1 out of 22 events specifically for women. The rest are open to anyone but don't include many female pros. Alban admits that esports also failed female players who are currently underrepresented at the top level. Talented and gifted players are there, but we don't give them enough chances to perform at the highest level, and we don't give them enough paths to become pros. He promised the Olympic esports games will be different, and the goal will be for equal participation from the inaugural event next year. There's a commitment to aim for full parity, and that would be a game changer, not just for the Olympics, but for esports too. 2 babies have died on the hospital's neonatal intensive care unit during a bacterial outbreak, which could have been prevented. An internal investigation by Bradford Royal Infirmary, BRI, said lapses in hygiene practices allowed the drug-resistant bugs to spread. 5 other infants were found to have the same Klebsiella pneumonia strain during the outbreak in November 2021. The mother of a 2-week-old boy who died said she felt betrayed by the hospital and had begun legal action. Bradford Teaching Hospitals NHS Trust said it had implemented new infection control measures, brought in additional training and increased staffing levels. A nurse who previously worked at the neonatal unit said staff faced extreme strenuous conditions which led to medical mistakes. The Trust's internal probe into the outbreak found there had been a missed opportunity to provide the most appropriate antibiotics for 2-week-old Harris when he first fell ill. A patient safety incident investigation report circulated internally in March 2022 also said infection control practices which could have stopped the spread of Klebsiella were not being implemented consistently by staff in the unit. The babies who died were both born several months prematurely and were being cared for in the same room of the neonatal unit at the time of the outbreak. On the 10th of November, one of the babies was found to have sepsis, a life-threatening blood infection caused by Klebsiella pneumonia, but due to staffing levels it was deemed not clinically safe to move the infant into isolation, as would usually be expected, the report said. The baby died on the 12th of November. During a routine have been infected with bacteria. He died of sepsis on the 21st of November. His mother, Sarah, said it was a really difficult time. I couldn't believe it because he was doing well and then suddenly he was gone. When it came to him being buried, I just kept thinking he'd be in the best place with the best care. Klebsiella pneumonia is a common bacterium that lives in the intestines and is usually harmless. But if it gets into other parts of the body, such as the bloodstream, it can cause serious infections such as pneumonia, particularly among patients with weakened immune systems. Some strains are showing a growing resistance to the antibiotics doctors usually use to treat infections and can cause serious illness or death, even in previously healthy people. The World Health Organization, WHO, has said it is very concerned about drug-resistant bacteria such as Klebsiella, warning these so-called superbugs are a major global health threat. The number of Klebsiella infections has been increasing in UK hospitals, with 11,823 cases recorded by NHS trusts in 2022 to 2023, up 3% on the previous year, according to UK Health Security Agency data. Sarah from Bradford was only 22 weeks pregnant when she went into labour with Harris. My husband and I thought we were going to lose the baby, and we were terrified, said Sarah, who was aged 25 at the time. But despite being born 4 months prematurely, Harris seemed to be healthy, and medics at BRI had no major concerns about him until he became unwell about a week after birth. Doctors told his parents the baby in the neighbouring cot had died of an infection which had been passed to Harris. Sarah said she had never heard of Klebsiella before, adding it was horrible reading about it. I realised that it spread from baby to baby and couldn't understand how. Over the next few days, Harris's health deteriorated and he died in his mother's arms as she cradled him for the first time. Sarah said, I didn't expect to go into hospital, give birth to a baby, and then take him home to be buried. 4 months after Harris died, the NHS Trust's report on his death landed on his parents' doorstep. It revealed an investigation had found staff in the neonatal unit were not consistently following hand hygiene guidelines at the time of the outbreak and seemed unclear about where and when personal protective equipment was required. The report also said there was a missed opportunity to make an earlier change to Harris's antibiotic therapy because the detection of Klebsiella pneumonia in the unit had not been communicated. 5 other infants were found to have the strain in their bodies during the outbreak, which forced the hospital to temporarily close the unit to new admissions, but none of them required treatment. Hannah Lucy Delahoyd, a solicitor, Owen Mitchell, who was representing the family, said she was shocked and horrified to see all of the things that went wrong, and how easy it could have been to prevent the death of his baby. My heart broke for the family to know that if these simple changes could have been made, the baby might be with them now. Sarah, who has brought a medical negligence claim against the NHS Trust, said, "I hope BRI learn from this and make sure it never happens again." The two babies who died in November 2021 were not the first that year to lose their lives after being infected with Klebsiella at BRI. 7 months earlier in April, another baby died after being infected with a different strain of bacteria. Timothy Walsh, Professor of Medical Microbiology at the University of Oxford, said lessons should have been learned from the earlier outbreak. It surprises me and disappoints me because if you ever look at the April report, there's no mention of improving infection prevention control practice. Professor Walsh, who has studied drug-resistant superbugs for 25 years, said there should have been intensive swabbing and the staff should have been more vigilant after the bacteria was first detected in November 2021. A nurse who previously worked at the hospital's neonatal intensive care unit said staff were tired and overworked. She said, "While I was working there, the conditions were extremely strenuous. The staff I was working with were doing extremely long hours. They weren't able to take regular breaks, and that led to fatigue, which led to unintentional medical mistakes. You know, nurses know that proper hand-washing technique is important, but if you're overworked, that becomes really difficult." She added, "In neonatal intensive care, you should have a ratio of 1 baby to 1 nurse, but sometimes that would be 3 babies to 1 nurse or 2 babies to 1 nurse. I'd go to work anxious thinking, am I going to have that adequate support that I need to provide the adequate level of care?" Bradford Teaching Hospitals declined to answer the questions about staffing levels on the neonatal intensive care unit and the number of infection-related deaths at the hospital. A spokesperson for the trust offered their sincere condolences to the families affected for their sad loss, and said that they had put in place additional infection prevention and control measures and increased staffing levels and training for neonatal nurses care. A recent assurance review of neonatal services carried out by NHS England concluded that the service provides safe, high-quality care. A Department of Health and Social Care spokesperson said, "Our deepest sympathies are with families affected in this tragic case. The government will deliver the biggest expansion of NHS staff in history, with more doctors, nurses and midwives to deliver the quality, safe care patients and their families deserve." The security service can continue to neither confirm nor deny whether a man who attacked his girlfriend with a machete was an MI5 agent, as judges have ruled. In 2022, a BBC News investigation established through multiple sources that the man, known as X for illegal reasons, was an MI5 agent. He used his MI5 role to coercively control Beth, his ex-partner. He was physically and sexually abusive and was filmed threatening to kill her and then attacking her with a machete. Beth, not her real name, complained to the watchdog, which considers complaints against the intelligence services. She has asked the Investigatory Powers Tribunal (IPT) to investigate MI5's recruitment and handling of X, and whether any steps were taken to address the risk of harm he posed. The IPT will consider whether MI5's conduct breached Beth's human rights by enabling X to subject her to violence and abuse with impunity. The IPT is a panel of senior judges which investigates human rights claims against MI5, MI6 and GCHQ. The IPT's non-public hearings can take place in secret, with evidence kept from claimants, or in private, meaning not in public, but with access for claimants and their lawyers. MI5 has always refused to publicly confirm whether or not X was an agent, meaning an authorised informant. A preliminary hearing in May centred on whether MI5 should be able to maintain its position of neither confirming nor denying, known as NCND, whether X was an agent. Her legal team, led by the Centre for Women's Justice, argued it will be a serious interference with Beth's ability to have a fair trial. They submitted that X had already disclosed his role to Beth and that hearings could take place in private. Lawyers for MI5 argued that setting alongside the long-standing NCND principle would be damaging to national security. In a judgment, the IPT has ruled in favour of MI5, saying the principle fundamentally relies upon the absolute consistency of its application. The two judges conclude MI5 agents are effectively given a guarantee that their status will not be acknowledged and caveats would not undermine. The judges say they accept that maintaining NCND impacts on Beth's fair trial rights because she cannot counter whatever evidence may or may not be presented in secret. But there are procedural safeguards to reduce the impact, such as tribunal lawyers representing her interests. The full trial is scheduled for January 2025. The original investigation exposed how X was able to leave the UK while under police investigation to work for a foreign intelligence service, and showed how MI5 had then obtained X's belongings from the police. X also abused and threatened to kill another former female partner and her child, and he then used the woman's name as a form of cover while working for MI5. He also threatened to kill and sexually abuse young girls and had written down his cannibal fantasies about eating children. The government took the BBC to court to block the story from being broadcast. It failed to do so, but succeeded in gaining him legal anonymity, having argued X would be in danger if publicly named. The BBC argued he should be identified so that women could be warned about such a predatory and violent man.